Technical difficulties, but I think we are good now. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Today we are going to speak about Mula Bandha, or aspects of Mula Bandha. I would say that it's useful for you, if you have not already, to see the video where I went through aspects of breath before you see this one. So you can stop this one now, go to that one, and then do this one later. I'm not going to go through the breathing process, but I will apply the breath to the Bandha practice, so it might be good if you have practiced some of that before. All right, so Mula Bandha. I first encountered Mula Bandha when I started practicing a couple of decades ago now, and I encountered it in the context of Ashtanga yoga. I came from a background of being a dancer, so previous to that, of course, I had worked my center, all these Graham techniques and all the classical techniques. Holding center was a thing. So I felt like I was reasonably well versed in that center practice, or what they call the Mula Bandha practice. However, I was unfamiliar with the actual lock of the root, with the actual application from below instead of just pushing the belly in. So I did both for as long as I did Ashtanga, and I found that my breath was suffering enormously. I had to apply very strong Ujjayi breathing just to match this almost borderline tension that I was applying to my lower abdomen and to my root as well. And it was always the feeling of a conflict or of a fight between the two of them. So I think I dropped it when I got pregnant. It was very comfortable to just drop it and feel like it was mommy time, it was release time. And then I started doing a lot of yin yoga. I stepped off the Ashtanga train, and I found my own way of orienting myself around this practice. Now, Bandha found its way back to me when I started experiencing lower back injuries, locked lower back, shoulders, a feeling of heaviness in the spine, aging, the hips feeling very uneven. And then I started investigating by myself what this Mula Bandha could actually bring to the picture. And what I will dive into today in this short little practice slash lecture is my current relationship to Mula Bandha. Because like all concepts, like all phenomena, this also changes. It has changed very much from when I met it until where I sit with it today. So I assume that once again it will change as I go into the future. Maybe not as much, since I have a broader understanding. But this is how I'm working with Mula Bandha today. All right. You want to create a comfortable seat for the practice of Mula Bandha. You want, as I always say, the weight of the pelvis to really sink down towards the ground with a sense of ease and comfort. So you can drop the weight of your legs and the weight of your pelvis down to the pull of gravity and relax them. If this position or a cross-legged position doesn't feel good, you can of course build yourself up like so, come up a little bit higher, then it feels much easier. Or you can come to this one, which is also nice, the more Sazen version of things. Inner thighs moving slightly together, so you feel there's a parallel sense of the femur bones drawing into the hip joint. This, if you have challenged hips, will feel easier because here they can do a mild internal rotation. The aim of the game is to find a place for the pelvis that feels super comfortable before we start working with its strength. With super comfortable, I'm going to put myself in profile so you really see. Very often, sorry, little hair timeout. Very often what you experience, let's take it from the floor, is that when you sit on the ground in a cross-legged position, if your hips are not open, you have a sensation of falling back like this. Now to just muscle the spine up to an upright position and the chest to be open, it takes a whole lot of muscular effort. And it creates a lot of tension here in the lower back and a lot of tension here in the front of the hips. So my ideal posture for that pelvis is to bringing it close to the femur bone, almost feeling as you're rocking towards the front of the sit bones, almost feeling as though the pubic bone starts dropping down and under, the tailbone starts going back and a little bit up, like a little wagging tail. And this placement of the pelvis, it allows for my hips to feel soft, for my spine to feel effortlessly tall. It allows me to work with my breath by being able to relax the belly. And as you shall see, it will allow you to work with your bandha. Now, the similar thing can happen, perhaps easier for some, if you come to this posture. Once again, no slumping here in the lower back. You also see what slumping in the lower back does to the upper back. It compensates this way, and then you're stuck in this very constrictive position. So you take that pelvis and you move it forward towards your femur, towards your thigh. And then from here, when the thigh bone sticks deep into the hip joint, then it's easier for the hips to relax and once again for the spine to climb tall without any sense of muscular effort. All this to say, the seat is very important. So build yourself a good one. The next stop is talking about what Mula Bandha is on a more physical practice level. In the most simplistic version of it, you can say that you take the pelvic floor and you go squeeze and then lift. Almost like a sponge lifting up, upwards and inwards. Now, those of you that have given birth and that have worked, of course, with Mula Bandha before, this will come easy. For those of you that haven't, this may take some time before you find that coordination, before you even find that group of muscles down there, before you can send the signal of your mind to do that instruction. But keep searching for it. Squeeze pelvic floor and lift it upwards and inwards. When you lift the pelvic floor slightly upwards and inwards, it affects the lowest part of the abdomen here just over the pubic bone. And that becomes a little more contracted, becomes a little harder. It's as though you're creating a belt of strength moving from the sacrum all the way around here to just on top of the pubic bone, but below the belly button. Now this lifting upwards and inwards and that slight little tightening from the lowest part of your belly wants to allow for the upper belly to relax so that there's space for breath. Now this is very tricky. Of course, it's easier to just go hold, lock, like I did for many, many years, but then the breath becomes a bit more labored. You will feel like you have to fight for the breath in a different way. So already now, see if you can practice with a sense of stubborn moderation when you address your Mula Bandha. Lifting it upwards and inwards, feeling the lower abdomen moving in, a little closer to the spine, but then allowing the top part around your rib cage, around that diaphragm, to stay relaxed. And that's an act of coordination, but it's this coordination that will help you a lot in the yoga practice. This internal coordination between finding strength from the root, from your center, finding mobility, a sense of freedom, movement around your respiratory diaphragm. Now, there's a third diaphragm, and that is the one that I utilize for the Ujjayi breathing, right here at the base of the throat. So, let's see if we can. Lifting our bandha, applying a soft Ujjayi breath, See if you can bring that breath down and out. Let it swell out in your rib cage. Let it widen it like an accordion, whilst that Mula Bandha is being tempered. If you lift it too much, you'll feel it strangles the breath. If you don't lift it at all, you feel like you get a little soggy down there. You lose touch, you lose connection. Practice a little bit for yourself. Lifting upwards and inwards from the pelvic floor. Allowing that little tightening in the lowest part of your belly, creating that belt of strength just above your pubic bone. And then the soft, mobile diaphragm, the soft, relaxed upper abdomen that allows you to spread the breath wide, to still feel that very slow, calm breathing, feeling it possible, even though there is a lock at the bottom, a hole. Now then there's that third diaphragm right here at the center, right? Our Ujjayi breathing. I like to think of it as the three diaphragms coordinating with different qualities. We have one diaphragm down here, which is part of that Mula Bandha, and that strengthens, it lifts upwards and inwards. It's looking for stability, for foundation, for ground. Then we have that movement, that freedom of movement diaphragm at the center that dances to the influence of your breath. And then you have the throat diaphragm that vibrates, shakes, creating the sound like a little control center right here. Now let's see if we can make the three diaphragms work at the same time. Mula Bandha, upwards and inwards. See if you can relax the upper abdomen. Apply your Ujjayi, your throat diaphragm. Tricky? Probably a bit, depending on where you are in your practice and what your experience with Bandha is. Work very patiently. I would say that this lecture is quite an advanced practice. It's accessing the inner energies, the inner qualities of those energies, and then finding a coordination that creates balance in the system. It's quite an advanced one. But I would also say that it's one that needs to be addressed already from the beginning, so you don't get trapped into this of years and years of tightening your belly, getting pain in the lower back, feeling that your breath is strangled. Then you have to rework all that. So I'm giving you a little shortcut. Okay, next step of our bandha. I imagine, this is all me, it's not probably in any textbook. I imagine that as bandha moves up, there are helpers that create a sense of foundation, and those are my sit bones. So imagine that the sit bones, as that bandha climbs up at the center, the sit bones, they weigh down a little bit more, almost growing roots down into the ground, into the pillow, into the block. Then I imagine two more, the pubic bone and the tailbone. Although this is not exactly their direction, I imagine that they also create that sensation of dropping down towards the ground. So you create like the feet of a rocket. Ground, root, stability. I call them Bandha's little helpers. So they move down and Bandha moves up, and all that makes you feel like you have a lot of stability and strength right where the spine starts, around the lowest part of your belly, the lower back. And then this freedom of movement in your breath, it also wants to describe a certain freedom of mobility in the upper part of the spine. This stays firm, this cements the placement of the hips. But the upper back wants to feel relaxed. It wants to be able to twist, maybe open this way, holding on to that anchor, that steadiness from the Bandha practice. Okay. Let's take this into an actual position and we'll see how it works there. We're going to go down to child's pose. So, come to your child's pose. Place your hips on your heels. Place your hands in front of you or elbows a little closer, maybe like this. And then drop the weight of the head down. First, dive into your breath. Let the two upper diaphragms work. One creating that sense of control, of guiding in the breath, and one allowing for the mobility of the movement that the breath produces inside the body through that diaphragm. Widening, opening, sinking down slightly, feeling like it's giving the spine, giving the back, giving the organs a little massage. And then from here, the next time you exhale, start squeezing and lifting and addressing your Mula Bandha. And I mean the whole package. The lifting upwards and inwards from the pelvic floor, but also your sit bones now not pointing down to the ground, but right back towards the back that points to your back. This, now for these demonstration purposes, I will lift up a little bit. So I'm kind of holding here through the strength in the Mula Bandha, all the while the shoulders can stay soft. Spine still has mobility in the upper region. And then from here, I lean the top of the head as far away as I can from that Mula Bandha that goes back. And then I apply breath. Either stay where you are and relax a little bit or come up and sit. Another thing you probably notice as you're working with this Mula Bandha and this internal coordination is that the body gets very hot. I believe in the more traditional teaching of Mula Bandha, it is one that holds the Agni, the fire on the inside by locking the root. So the energy of the breath, it creates heat, the muscular attention, it creates heat, and that heat gets to go in and stoke that digestive fire, which is good for us. I don't practice it that way, but I see why it is like that. Yes, I practice it mainly from the physical point and how it treats my bones, how it creates stability and a sense of center in me. But yes, it does make you warm as well. Okay, so from here, we're going to look at how that same practice applies to a bit of movement. Very simple. We start once again from our child's pose. We drop the weight of our head, we find our breath, we find our bandha. We start already now feel the lengthening of the spine as though the sit bones, the Mula Bandha, pull the pelvis in the direction of our back, while the top of the head reaches very lightly but insistingly in the direction of our front. Now, when I inhale, I'm going to come up to a cat position and imagine that the top of the head brings me there. When I exhale, I'm going to imagine that Mula Bandha pulls me back to a child's pose. Top of the head reaches forward as we inhale. And then the Mula Bandha, sit bones, tailbone, pubic bone, pelvic floor, pull back to that child. Do it at your own breath rhythm. Inhaling, coming up to cat, working, feeling the direction of that top of the head. And then letting Bandha take over and rocking you back to child's pose. One more time. Inhaling, coming up to a cat position. Exhaling, Bandha pulls you back down. Now, as you see, if you look at me for a second, as I'm rocking here, up and down from a cat to a child, all the joints affected, the wrist, the elbow, the shoulder, the hips, the knees, the ankles, they get a little massage. Since I use the top of the head and the bandha as the instrument, the main player in creating the movement, the muscles surrounding the joints can relax, and this gentle movement will warm up those joints. Now the next part, do it with me. We come up to a cat position, and then as we exhale, we're going to curve the spine. Now, not because it's right, but because I like it. Yes, we are going to curve starting with bandha. So I grab the bandha and then I move it deliberately below, feeling how that curve ripples through the whole spine, allowing the weight of the head to really drop, relax neck. And then I do the same thing the other way. I deliberately move the tail, the bandha, the pelvis upwards, letting it ripple up through the chest into an arch. And then I grab it again and I curve. All this happening to the rhythm of your breath. Feeling the initiation of the movement coming from bandha and the top of the head. Using that articulation, that precision to really work the vertebrae. Work to get to know that feeling in the vertebrae, the detailed feeling when you work a little slower. Okay, let's do all three. Come back to child's pose. Follow me. Inhale, move to cat. Let the top of the head lead the way. Exhale, curve your spine. Bandha starts. Head drops last. Inhale, arch. Bandha looks up. So does the top of the head. Then I squeeze my bandha and let it pull me back to child. One more time. Inhale to your cat. Exhale, curving, starting with bandha. Inhale, arching, bandha starts again. And then it's that mula bandha that pulls me back to child. Okay. So, I use this mula bandha. I think the best way to describe it is that I create a heightened sense of awareness and utility of that lost fifth limb, which would be our tail, which is now our tailbone, and in the bigger picture is the pelvis. Now, very often the pelvis, the hips just sits there and it's either very stiff or very, very flexible, as in my case, and then it's very difficult to control it. No, control it is the wrong word. It's very difficult to manage it without either creating too much tension around the hips or without getting asymmetrical. Taking too much strength from this butt, from this leg, and then creating imbalance. Now, when I work this Mula Bandha practice and I let the Bandha initiate the movement for me and also create a pillar of strength around that pelvis, around that fifth limb, then it's like you have increased your physical intelligence a little bit. You can control movement from here, from here, from here, but also the movement can be controlled through feeling how you place that bandha. So center sits at the center of how you move. And if you look, even though I'm just playing around here, that central practice, when it becomes a game of awareness around that center, it allows for the spine to move freely, almost as if Mula Bandha is a thing, a hold around the spinal cord. And as you move the center, the spine is just wobbling along, coming along, without needing to have such strength or such muscular energy involved. So, now would be the time when this was a live class. I would say, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Do you have any questions? Now, I'm just going to have to assume that it makes sense. And I'm going to have to assume that you have a million questions, but with this medium, hey, you can't ask. Now, I'm going to go into one more little detail of this useful Mula Bandha, and that will be reorienting the way you use strength much more through here. I see a lot of strength being built up here, or the whole upper part becomes very strong because it's closer to the brain, and we feel like it's easier to control it. Now, in this instance, I'm almost thinking of that Mula Bandha like a black hole. So I draw the energy, all that strength and energy goes into it, and then I try to let that be a part of my philosophy of creating strength below, from my feet, from my legs, from my bandha, so that the spine, the house, the cage that houses your organs, the shoulders, the neck, the bridge for your nervous system here, that can stay soft, more flexible, not creating so much tension around it. Now, a very good demonstration of this would be downward facing dog. So, I will just get into downward facing dog, and you can do it with me. I'll talk you through it. When watching, that's also fine if you feel like it's more of an interest as a lecture. So I find a kind of easy dog, a narrow dog. I try to be meticulous about placing my hands in alignment with my elbows, alignment with the shoulders, rotating those shoulders slightly external. Now, if you're in a normal downward facing dog and you're hanging down here, and I'm exaggerating a little bit, it feels like this guy here, the pelvis, is super heavy. And it all just comes crashing down on top of the shoulders, thus building once more that strength on top. Now, when I apply my Mula Bandha, I hike up the pelvic floor. I increase that level of band of strength around the pubic bone. And then I use that to kind of pull the pelvis slightly upwards away from the rib cage, as though I'm growing a longer waist. Then I hold that there when I feel like I've reached the maximum, and then I let the rest of the spine just drop, just slide, just relax. And then, of course, there's the help from the trapezius, from below the shoulder blades, around the shoulder blades, to maybe push a little back. But I let the main job happen through my bandha. The feet push down, the knees are lifted if the legs are straight, or aligned with the toes if the knees are bent. I try for the crease at the front of the hip to stay as relaxed as possible, feeling as though I'm digging that crease deeper and deeper the more I engage my bandha, pulling the root, pulling the pelvis upwards and away, allowing the rest of the spine to slide down. Okay, everyone come down to child's pose if you were up in that downward facing dog. Stay with your breath. Stay with that Bandha practice. Now you should be really warm inside. Even if we only did that one strong pose, the presence of Bandha creates a very strong sense of fire inside. So, the actual physical practice of Bandha, the aspect of it that for me is the most useful one, the most important one, would be that internal coordination between those three diaphragms. The lowest diaphragm lifting upwards and inwards, creating a sensation of stability, of center, of foundation, of ground. Then that respiratory diaphragm, relax. Remember that jellyfish liking, and it's dancing, it's moving, it's spreading at the rhythm of your breath, allowing for that little massage in the world of organs. And then you have the throat diaphragm, your little control center, where if you tighten a bit more, the sound gets more, the energy gets a little bit more powerful. And when you lighten the load here, it's fine. Almost like a whisper that only you can hear. That internal coordination has come to me after a lot of research of how to kind of explain it to you. But I would say it's one of the most useful ways I have found to work with my body. I was one that definitely had all the strength up on top, big shoulders. I mean, they're still big, but not that much. I had a locked breath here because I had a strong abdominal wall. And then I had a pelvis that was just a little bit wobbly, and I tried to control it all from there. So this coordination, this presence of Bandha, when it doesn't interfere with the breath, when it can work in harmony with the breathing, that to me has been, still is, the place where I draw more use of it. And then, of course, in the sitting postures, like we went through, that feeling of the pillars, Bandha's little helpers, which would be the sit bones sinking down, pubic bone moving towards the floor, tailbone moving towards the floor, creating like those legs of the rocket, and then that rocket being right at the center, lifting upwards and inwards. That, very useful for hip openers, very useful for any sort of seated posture. Like, for example, if you go to a twist, I'm just going to give you that one example also. When you go to a twist, it's very easy to, especially when we're in the beginning of our yoga journey, to get a little bit carried away, and we want to twist just a little bit more. So then we get to something like this. We start to lift the pelvis, or maybe better demonstrated here. So when I go through, I kind of lift up so I can go a little bit deeper. If I maybe want to go all the way in here, for example. Now this is not a healthy alignment of the pelvis. So I use the practice of Bandha to bring me back home, to bring me back center, feeling those sit bones, the direction of the pubic bone and the tailbone, and then that force at the center, calming me down, centering me, and then enter into the position from there, from that anchor. And that anchor, as you see, when it's on, it creates it's almost like a feeling of confidence that allows me to lengthen the spine without muscling it too much, so that the breath can go in and work its magic. Those were the helpers of Bandha. Then we have that sense of direction from Bandha, where the Mula Bandha, okay, let me give you one more example. Let's see, I can't stand up because I set it up like this. Now we do the same one. When you come from here and you allow Bandha to, besides creating a sense of stability as the pelvis is moving, a sense of working towards symmetry in your hips, it, by being such a central presence, this rocking motion here, it allows for you to relax your shoulders, your elbows, your wrists, your knees, your hips, your ankles, because it's just a game of moving up, using that as a compass, And then moving down, using your bandha as a compass. Coming up to cat, and then using bandha as the compass that takes you towards that curve. Eventually that bandha will be the compass that sends your hips up to a downward facing dog. And then finally, that feeling of strength at the center. Another good way to demonstrate that would be plank position. In your plank position, if you don't have any bandha, well then you're just giving yourself a lot of extra weight to work with. Now, when you have that bandha in place, without tucking the tail under, you keep that mula bandha in place. Then as you go down, you can use that force, that strength, to kind of temper the descent, to control the descent, the direction of your elbows, the placement of your shoulders, etc. Maybe one of the more important things in these aspects of bandha is to not confuse mula bandha with the tucking under of the pelvis. I see very often, I'm going to do it here because otherwise I'm not showing. I see very often that instead of applying mula bandha from below, an easier way to access it is to do this, to just tuck the pelvis under. But if you look at me from the side here, what happens to my lower back? There's a unnatural curvature there that influences the middle back. It influences the feeling, the tightness here in the front of the hips around the psoas and the hip flexor. It hinders my breath. And should I want to keep an open chest here, I have to keep it open with a lot of sense of muscular tone. Whereas this creates a sense of effortlessness, just focusing on that energy efficient point of strength, which is your mula bandha, and finding your placement from there. A little duck tail, a softening at the front of the hips, and only the pelvic floor lifting upwards and inwards, the lowest part of your belly coming in a little bit, but without it affecting the placement of the pelvic bone. All right. That was a little bit of aspects of Bandha that I wanted to share with you. And I think both the breath practice that I did a couple of days ago and this one, it's useful for you to see them before you go on in other classes. And it's useful to see them once in a while, just to remind yourself that these pointers, these internal practices are so helpful, so interesting, so fascinating to work with in your practice. Now, if you have the space, the time, maybe lay down for a savasana and digest all this information of my version of Mula Bandha. And I shall see you soon again. You shall see me soon again.